Computer, run program CPLT387. I don't hear people mention Batman Arkham Knight that often, and whenever I do, it's never with the same amount of enthusiasm and praise that's usually given to its predecessors. Usually, Arkham Knight is, at best, reluctantly acknowledged, and at worst, downright detested. Plenty of the complaints against this game have merit, but the vast majority of the hatred it receives is unwarranted, and the few flaws that Arkham Knight does possess don't prevent it from being the richest, most comprehensive, and quite frankly, the best Batman video game ever made. Welcome to the Completionist, where we don't just beat the games, we complete them. And this is Batman Arkham Knight.
Here comes a new challenger! Yes! Danger!
Things don't always turn out the way you expect. Back in 2009, I don't think anyone was expecting Arkham Asylum to turn out as good as it did, what with the history of Batman video games before it. I don't think many people were expecting Arkham City to surpass the original so thoroughly, becoming an icon of its generation. And who could have predicted that Rocksteady Studios, at the height of their franchise's success, would hand over the reins to a completely different company? But of course, hindsight is 2020. Rocksteady trusting another team to create a stopgap game in their massively successful franchise now seems like the obvious move to make, considering all the hungry fans they had to satisfy, as well as the lofty ambitions they had for the next mainline title in the Arkham series. Now, ironically enough, Arkham Origins would go on to fit many people's expectations a little too well. It was a great game in its own right, but to many, it seemed like a mere extension of Arkham City as opposed to an entity unto itself. But while it provided more of the tried and true, Arkham Knight was designed as an exploration of new territory. It took 4 long years in the oven, but when Arkham Knight finally released in 2015, its ambitiousness was immediately evident in its gameplay, narrative, and overall design. And the critics seemed to respond. But many fans' responses fell squarely in the negative. Bugs and glitches ran rampant in the PC version. Certain narrative elements intended as a mystery were deemed by many as disappointingly obvious. And the implementation of the Batmobile remains one of the most divisive video game mechanics in recent history. Soon after launch, the bulk of positive qualities that Arkham Knight brought to the table were drowned out by a cacophony of criticism. And just like that, Arkham Knight went from one of the most hotly anticipated games of the previous generation to what it is today, the most hated in the Arkham franchise. Once again, hindsight is 2020. It's easier to see now how the mountain of expectations erected by fans over 4 years of anticipation could become insurmountable. It's hard for any game to live up to the ones built by loyal fans in their own heads. But if one examines what Arkham Knight is as opposed to what it's not, they'll discover what's easily the darkest and most poignant entry in the series. Things kick off on Halloween night, and the relative peace in the months since the events of Arkham City is suddenly broken when the Scarecrow unleashes his new, dangerously potent strain of fear gas on an unsuspecting diner and its patrons. Things don't go well. So much so that after Scarecrow promised to unleash his poison across the entirety of Gotham City, it's completely evacuated. All that's left behind are Gotham's more unsavory citizens and several members of Batman's rogues gallery. That is, except for the appearance of a new threat. One that has a heavily armored militia in his corner and also seems to know some of Batman's deepest secrets. On top of all of that, Batman's fighting a losing battle on yet another front, dealing with the psychological and physiological ramifications of his last encounter with his arch nemesis. So it's Batman and a few of his allies versus an entire army. And this time, the entire city of Gotham is the battleground. This may be the biggest Arkham game ever, but Batman still utilizes his usual main mechanics: citywide exploration, microbursts of puzzle solving, deep combat, and predatory stealth. But that's only scratching the surface of what this game contains. At this point, it's no surprise that each Arkham game is going to have more DLC than the one before it. But when I purchased the premium edition on PC, I was not prepared for the sheer amount of extra content, and thus things that would require completing that it would include. It seems like Arkham Origins was the last game in the franchise to receive traditional one-shot DLC, because Arkham Knight subscribes to the increasingly popular seasonal stream of post-launch content. Several character-based mini-campaigns, extra villains to contend with during the main campaign, and most dauntingly, more AR challenges than have ever been in an Arkham game by far. No other Batman game comes close to this one when it comes to being a challenge for completionists. But even when only taking a look at the elements that make up the base game, it's clear that Arkham Knight illustrates several shades of Batman that have never really been explored in this medium. In fact, Arkham Knight contains the most thorough, most multifaceted depiction of Batman and his world that have ever been presented in a video game. At this point, the pattern is clear to see here, folks. Each Arkham game is going to be a better Batman simulator than the last. It used to be a delightful surprise each time Rocksteady outdid themselves, somehow allowing the player to feel more and more like the Bat with each subsequent title. But by now, it's expected, and Arkham Knight doesn't buck that trend in the slightest. Of course, the Dark Knight's got some new wonderful toys, like the projectile version of his explosive gel and the voice synthesizer. Great additions, yes. Please stand right there so I can cut off your oxygen supply. And of course, there are new enemy types, such as the Medic, who continue to refine the combat and stealth experiences just by the nature of their very existence. But what makes Arkham Knight stand out from the pack are its several additions that allow players to feel like a different type of caped crusader than they've ever had access to. Bats can now perform the Fear Multi-Takedown. It allows him to instantly take down up to 5 unaware thugs as long as each one is standing close enough to the next. It drastically improves the quality of life, considering how much more populated this game's Predator sessions are. But more importantly, it mirrors the type of Batman who routinely takes down a whole room in the blink of an eye. We've all seen that move plenty of times, but now we can pull it off ourselves. Another example would be the solitary lone wolf Batman that, so far, has been the star of the Arkham series. He may have had some sporadic help here and there, but for the most part, he's been running solo until now. There are several sequences in Arkham Knight in which players take control of Batman and a partner at the same time. Not only does this open up entirely unexplored avenues of gameplay, it also brings another new type of Batman to the table. Pulling off tandem combo attacks with another member of the Bat family feels incredible, and so does getting to pilot this previously unrepresented version of the Dark Knight. And players can get the same feeling just by roaming through Gotham City. We've never been here before. All right, technically we have been here before, but that was an unrecognizable Prison City version of Gotham that didn't exist before the people at Rocksteady dreamed it up. Even the pre-Arkhamed version of that city, which was roughly double in size, didn't yet feel like the true Gotham. It was great, but it could have been more open, more interactive, and more populated. But now this Gotham is big enough to believably be a place where several of Batman's adventures have taken place. It may not be as large as some other video game metropolises, but it is mentioned that Arkham Knight only takes place in central Gotham, 3 of its oldest islands, around which the rest of the city was constructed. Regardless, this is by far the most massive Gotham in which we've ever gotten to play, and it's also the most open. Both versions of Arkham City, as well as the Origins exclusive area, were afflicted with these towering, impassable structures smack dab in the middle of their play areas. Getting from one side of the map to the other often meant circumnavigating these inexplicably non-interactive barriers. That ate up a lot of time when all you really wanted to do was to go straight through. But there's nothing like that to get in your way in Arkham Knight. Ever. The skies are fully clear, and just about any building or structure you see, you can summit. Players can now get up close and personal with just about any structure and really examine the fine details. Thankfully, Gotham's level of detail has been drastically increased. There are little stories everywhere that players can glean for themselves based solely on the architecture and zoning of the different neighborhoods. There are plenty of Batman and DC comic Easter eggs for observant fans, and if players pay enough attention, they can even witness the world subtly change around them. Now, this version of Gotham even goes so far as to maintain the fidelity of the world established by the Arkham franchise. From the right spot, you can spy several pieces of Arkham's history, from Arkham City, including Ivy's Hotel and the Wonder Tower, to the Origins exclusive South Gotham. You can see Wayne Manor out in the Palisades, and of course, the Asylum, where it all started. In essence, there's never been an Arkham game where there's been this much that's worth exploring, and Batman has never been so free to explore them. And to accommodate that new freedom, Batman's gliding techniques has seen some drastic enhancements. The grapnel boost can now be fired multiple times before hitting the ground. It can also be boosted multiple times to spring launch Batman high into the sky. And best of all, Batman glides faster than ever. By the time you unlock a good portion of Batman's upgrades, one of the more effortless pieces of completion criteria, this guy absolutely moves through the city, approaching Spider-Man levels of aerial maneuverability and control. And wisely, this Gotham has been built to facilitate that. Now, I know I've been singing the praises of this Gotham City for a while now. There's a reason for that. This city allows players to roleplay as yet another kind of Batman, as of yet absent from this series. And it's an important one. It's the one who feels like he actually stalks these rooftops. This isn't the Batman who's been summoned to Arkham for a single night. And it's not the one who's infiltrated a state-run prison camp. We finally get to be the Batman in the Gotham, in his natural element, and that is special. But it's not just Batman that's explored so thoroughly. Arkham Knight also adds previously unseen depth and wrinkles to characters who've been a part of this series since the very beginning. James Gordon gets far more development than ever before when the relationship between him, his daughter, and Bruce is strained to the breaking point. Mr. Freeze has his own mini narrative that's just as much action-packed as it is heart-wrenching. In fact, having to play through this game twice, the second time on New Game Plus, isn't so bad when 1, you've got all your gadgets from the get-go, and 2, you get to relive these engrossing character moments. Most importantly, we get to see Batman react differently than he ever has with several characters. He finds himself cut off from Tim more than ever. He grows a little closer to Poison Ivy of all people, and his relationship with the Joker contains the best and darkest narrative moments of this game. This game isn't afraid to get dark, my dudes, depicting some of Batman's most iconic and most notorious moments in video game form for the very first time. This game deserves its M rating, and because it went there, we got to experience a Batman and a Gotham full of characters unlike any game before it. But that doesn't mean this game is perfect. I could always use more crime scene reconstruction. The boss fights, as usual, aren't much to write home about, save for a few. The identity of the Arkham Knight admittedly isn't much of a mystery if you're a Batman fan. And even after all these years, there are still some glitches out there, most of them harmless and hilarious. But we are ignoring the elephant in the room, the four-wheeled, nitro-boosted, hotly contested elephant in the room. But before we address that, I have some people to thank today. Namely, today's sponsor, Origin PC. Now, it took a lot of man hours from me and my team to make this episode happen. And the only reason we're able to turn any kind of profit from it at all is because of the people at Origin PC. Now, for those of you guys who don't know, I have partnered with Origin PC these last few months, and they've been awesome to work with. All games that I play on my PS4 in the last few months have been recorded on my Origin Big O PC. And the reason why is because there is a PS4 built into the computer. That's right, I have a PS4 mixed in with an incredibly powerful computer. My Big O Origin PC is what I use for everything with regards to streaming, recording, and editing. And they've already got their Black Friday deals going on right now. For a limited time, you can save up to $830 in bonuses when you purchase select Origin PC desktops and laptops. These things come with a lot of bonuses. You can pick up 2 bonuses if you order any laptop or any desktop with the GeForce RTX 2060 Super. And a desktop with the GeForce RTX 3070 will get you 3 bonuses. That includes stuff like headsets, keyboards, and SSDs. On top of all of that, you get free US ground shipping and digital copies of a ton of games, including Far Cry 6 and Marvel's Avengers, plus lots more. It's a good deal if you're looking to upgrade this holiday season, or if you've just run out of games to play while you've been quarantined. Once again, thank you to Origin PC for making this episode possible, and thanks to you guys at home for watching. If you want to get on those deals, remember to click the link in the box down below. If you ask most people who claim to dislike Arkham Knight why they feel the way they feel, most will probably bring up the Batmobile. Plenty of people over the years have shared their criticisms about how it has uncomfortable controls, and that it takes up far too much of Arkham Knight's design space. And while there are shades of truth to that, ultimately, the Batmobile does far more good for Arkham Knight than bad. First off, let's just acknowledge that getting a fully functioning Batmobile into a Batman video game is something a lot of us have wanted for years, and that includes the people at Rocksteady. If they could have had it, they would have dropped in Batman's wheels as far back as Arkham City. But it's been reported that technological limitations and the claustrophobic design of Arkham City itself kept that from happening. Now that they have created a city that's large enough to handle the Batmobile, if it hadn't been here, I think it's safe to say that a lot of people would have been disappointed, or at the very least confused by its omission. It's an undeniably iconic part of Batman, like the Batcave or his many partners. So the mere idea of including the Batmobile in this game isn't inherently bad. But that's not even what most of the detractors are claiming. Most of Arkham Knight's critics decry the way in which the car was implemented, starting with its controls. Okay, so it's got two modes that can be switched between at any time. A pursuit mode that mainly functions like a traditional speed machine, and a battle mode that's designed for slower paced combat. Pursuit mode is the Batmobile's default setting, and the controls do get troublesome when shifting into battle mode, which requires holding down a shoulder button, like for the whole time. Let go and you're back in pursuit mode. And yeah, this does not feel good. If you need to stay in combat for a while, your hand can end up seriously cramped. Battle mode is straight up uncomfortable. At least it was until I switched the Batmobile controls to toggle. Doing so allows players to switch between the two modes with a single easy button press. After that, battle mode felt perfectly fine. No fuss, no muss. So if this was what all the complaints were all about, then I have to think I'm still missing something. Because pursuit mode feels great to pilot. It could be a little unwieldy when laying on the boost button, but it's designed to be a powerhouse. This thing plows through obstacles with ease, and there's nothing like running someone off the road in slow motion or plowing right through an unmanned drone. It's a power trip that's not designed for finesse. But if that's what you want, that's where battle mode comes in. This thing was designed for tight spaces, and its handling is top-notch thanks to its extremely responsive controls. Between both modes, the Batmobile possesses the best of both worlds, offering not one but two new unique modes of transportation and improving the overall Arkham experience. Rocksteady clearly put a lot of work into ensuring that this car felt good to use, since it's used so much across the game. In effect, it's treated as just another one of Batman's tools, like the Batarang or a smoke bomb. He can access it at just about any time, and it's implemented into a large portion of Arkham Knight's content. You can use it mid-combo, during certain drone-based stealth sections, and it's integrated into a good portion of Arkham Knight's Riddler challenges, actually improving them. I enjoyed hunting these collectibles and challenges more than I have in a long time due to there being so many new types of puzzles. And that added variety can be attributed directly to the Batmobile. Players can hunt with sonar, pull with the car's winch, and even participate in inventive Riddler races, a design space that was wholly unexplored in this franchise until now. In general, it feels like there are far less repeated puzzle types than there usually are. Just when things were starting to get stale with the Arkham series signature collectibles, it's the Batmobile that's directly responsible for making them exciting again. This thing isn't just a one or even two trick pony. The Batmobile is incredibly versatile and makes the game more varied as a whole. But once again, I'm ignoring the elephant in the room here. While there have been several complaints about how much of the spotlight the Batmobile hogs up, I think the majority of the complaints against it are aimed at the very battles that battle mode was designed for. Arkham Knight contains several encounters with large groups of drone tanks. Their basic gameplay revolves around dodging their telegraphed shots, firing off ordnance of your own, and avoiding damage long enough to gain access to devastating devices that can take down tons of drones at once. And man, people seem to really hate these sequences with a passion. I admit that they certainly don't have as much mechanical complexity or depth as the regular combat or stealth encounters, but that's a bit of an unfair comparison to make. Those mechanics have been continually refined over 4 games and several years. These tank sequences haven't had that benefit, so it's understandable that they're not perfect yet. I've heard a few opinions claiming that these tank sequences ruin Arkham Knight, which in my eyes is a gross exaggeration. It's okay to enjoy one type of mechanic over another, or to even dislike a particular feature, but to not acknowledge something's clear merits is disingenuous. These tank engagements reward observation, improvisation, and planning, just like the rest of the game does. But I can totally understand how someone might eventually get tired of these battles. They show up a lot, and if someone isn't expressive with the way that they play, I can easily imagine how they could get bored or frustrated whenever these battles occur. But the exact same thing can be and has been said about the Arkham series' combat. If you just mash buttons and don't challenge yourself to perform as many variations as possible in each fight, the free flow combat might seem boring to you. And that goes for stealth as well. If you eliminate everyone with the silent takedown, ignoring all the unique methods of inspiring fear and creatively dispatching the bad guys, then those Predator missions might not seem like much either. So while these tank fights may show up a little too often, if you power up your battle mode gadgets enough and challenge yourself to go for a high combo, they fly by. Most importantly, if the Batmobile wasn't here at all, Arkham Knight would have probably felt like just another Arkham game instead of having the unique identity that it does. Ultimately, it makes this game better far more than it makes it worse. But adding more doesn't always mean making things better. Sometimes less is more, as is often the case when you're compelled to do it all. And when the main campaign's over and it's time to move on to the obligatory Arkham game challenge mode, that's when Arkham Knight turns into a predator that, whether by negligence or by design, ends up preying on completionists. Word to the wise. If you're not careful, Arkham Knight will lull you into lowering your guard with its handful of DLC mini campaigns. It's legitimately exciting to play as so many characters that we've never been able to control before. These narrative-based missions are short and sweet, sometimes too short, leaving you with a mere taste of finally getting to play as your favorite member of the Bat family. And just when you're praising this game for including so many characters, that's when you realize what that actually means. There are now more characters than ever that you have to complete the AR challenges with. No story, no city to roam, just pure, uncut shots of combat and stealth. Beating these challenges has always been a part of completing the Arkham games, as has obtaining all 3 bonus stars per mission. For combat, that means varying up your offense to reach high scores and remaining unscathed to keep those scores. And the Predator stars have always required extremely specific maneuvers and working within different restrictions, such as never being seen or taking down thugs in specific ways. In the past, these AR challenges have never featured more than 2 or 3 playable characters. But now, there are 8. Batman, Catwoman, Nightwing, Robin, Batgirl, Azrael, Harley Quinn, and the Red Hood. That means getting all 3 stars across every single AR challenge 8 times over. And just like that, the completion time spent in the challenge mode has quadrupled the time spent in the main campaign. Immediately, completionists are hit with a crippling dilemma. How do you tackle this? Do you stay on one mission, going down the line of characters so you can get used to that one challenge's specific nuances? Or do you pick one character and run the gauntlet with them so you don't have to constantly adapt to new characters after each successful run? The truth of it is that there's no real easy answer here, but I went with the latter. Even when committing to single characters, switching between them was difficult to adapt to. There is a lot of variation among the 8 characters. Don't get me wrong, that's a great thing. I'm glad that Robin can do things that Nightwing can't and vice versa. But when it's your compulsion or your job to finish all of these challenges, sometimes you want to curse out Catwoman for not having a reliable way to destroy the bad guys' shields. Look, I love that each character can be played on any challenge, but did they all have to have their own separate trackable stars? I get it. Getting to 50,000 points with Azrael is a totally different thing than doing so with Harley Quinn. But the choice to display them like this means I have to do it all. One small decision on the developer's parts has monstrous ramifications for completionists everywhere. But the difficulty of the combat missions was nothing compared to the nightmare that was the Predator sequences. There are only so many ways you can be challenged to reach a high score no matter who you're playing as. But Arkham Knight gets really devious when it's time to be stealthy. This game basically becomes a puzzle game with 8 different characters, and each level can range from not so bad to feeling impossible depending on the 3 stipulations it has. It took me hours to beat certain missions, like this one with Nightwing, where one of the rules was to not let any glass get shattered, and the whole place is made out of glass. Certain characters took longer than others, but on the whole, this was easily the biggest time investment and the hardest challenge in the entire completion process. But it doesn't even stop there. Let's not forget that the Batmobile is a thing, so of course it too has to be rolled into the AR challenges. This is also, in the grand scheme of things, a good thing. There's no reason players shouldn't be able to battle more drone tanks or race through river tracks whenever they want. In fact, all the battle mode challenges are cool with me because there's only one Batmobile skin that can shift into battle mode. The real issue comes from the AR races, since for every separate Batmobile skin, there are 3 stars to obtain, as if each pursuit mode skin was its own character. That means you have to run each AR race 6 different times. And these different cars had far more nuance between them than I ever expected. The superior acceleration of the 89 Batmobile can be clearly felt, and I love the tight handling of the tumbler. But for the life of me, I cannot figure out what the Arkham Asylum Batmobile is supposed to be good at. Only what it was bad at, which was everything. And if I'm worried about the subtle differences in how a car handles in my Batman Arkham challenges, something has gone wrong. I'm not saying that all these great options shouldn't be here, but things like checkboxes and in-game lists and fillable stars can't be ignored by those of us with the itch. For most players, this is all gravy, but for the select few of us, this turns otherwise stellar experiences into hell. Thankfully, the AR challenges are the exception and not the rule when it comes to being satisfied with what you get for putting in the work, because Arkham Knight has enough unlockables and straight up content to keep players plugged in for a long time. The few unlockables that Arkham Knight has are pretty standard fare. As players progress, they unlock character bios, concept art, and Gotham City stories, short pieces of text that flesh out the game's characters and settings. But players are more directly incentivized by the riddles screen, which features unlockable audio tapes starring some of the rogues gallery. The more riddles you solve, the more of these you get. Also, earning 240% on your profile by doing it all in both the first campaign and New Game Plus will net you the Batsuit version 8.05, which features a triumphantly gold bat symbol, a nice nod to your efforts. But there's actually a little bit of controversy when it comes to this game's bonuses. See, the actual final cutscene in Arkham Knight is locked behind fully completing a campaign run, including the riddles. That's something this series has never done before, and it really rubbed some people the wrong way. I mean, look, we completionists were always going to go the distance anyway, so this choice doesn't really bother me. But I still can't understand why so many people would be that upset about something being kept out of their reach when they didn't do it all. That's what a bonus is. Plus, it's just a cutscene. As potentially anticlimactic as the game's ending can feel without it, you can always just go on YouTube and look it up for yourself if you can't be bothered to check off every box. The bigger tragedy is the fact that players don't get anything for fully completing the AR challenges, meaning that the greatest challenge in the entire game goes virtually unrewarded outside of a point total that doesn't really mean anything. Considering how conscious Rocksteady usually is of rewarding their players, this one stung a bit. Arkham Knight may be the best of the but anything can eventually overstay its welcome, and that breaking point is clear to see here. Obtaining every star in the AR challenges was simply too much to ever be any fun. All of that content is a great feature as long as you don't feel compelled to finish it. This is the ultimate Batman game, no matter how you slice it. But for completionists, it'll probably be the very last Batman game you'll complete for a good long while. When I completed Batman Arkham Knight, there were 28 deaths. What can I say? Sometimes you get sloppy when you try to rush through stuff, and things happen. Note that this number is actually way higher if we're counting restarts on challenge missions. 240% achieved on my profile across 2 separate campaigns. There is a lot to do in the campaign, but thankfully, it all feels good to do. 243 riddles solved. It's always a treat when your riddles carry over to New Game Plus. Also, these were the most inventive and varied riddles in some time. 1,431 stars earned in the AR challenges. One innocuous cataloging choice has led to this gross number. Ugh. After doing this, I can hardly even remember the campaign. 140 hours of total playtime. And 4 excellent games that comprise the entirety of the Arkham saga. With the direction in which Gotham Knights is going, it seems the era of Arkham is truly over. Here's hoping we continue to get more franchises of this quality in the future. My name's Gerard, and this has been The Completionist. This game has somehow been both the best and worst time I've ever had with a Batman title. The campaign is Rocksteady's finest work by far, and it features the deepest version of Batman and Gotham yet. But completing all those challenges taints the entire experience. But that's clearly only the case when it comes to completion. If you play the campaign and merely dabble in all of the extra content to your individual tastes, this game cements itself as one of the best of the best. So, With that in mind, guys, I give this game my completionist rating of finish it.
Finish it!